our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
The Rebellion, episode 152.
High on top of the mountain, overlooking the splendor of North Georgia, I have across from me for the first time in the new studio, the one and only, my buddy, my brother, Banks Wise. What's going on, man?
Hey, Shane, I'm happy to be back. We have not recorded in the studio. Well, we'll never record in the studio again.
I said goodbye to it like 2 days ago.
Rip the studio. But we are in the new temporary studio, which will be here for a while. Shane was joking that you guys may not see much of a difference because it's about the same color.
The TV is not up yet?
That's true. But we've tried to recreate it as much as possible. The Ron Paul neon light has switched sides, so that's how you know it's different. But the same two guys who want to talk about peace, liberty, and free markets. And do we have a show for you today? As you can imagine, we're talking about war, unfortunately, once again. If you've listened to the show for a while, we're going to be referencing things that we've said over and over and over and over. But the new context is interesting, and I think especially since the public is involved more than usual, Shane, I don't know if you agree, like this, the Facebook comments and sharing and the public comments by figures, like all the political people, has made people, I think, needing to be aware of how to take what they're saying. I think the first thing to do is be skeptical and think out things.
This day
but
and
that's
age.
not necessarily what's happening.
Oh, man, I was going to get into that later in the show, man.
I mean, it is planned for later in the show. But
yeah, just the skepticalness is like, geez, oh, Pete, you've got all these alphabet soup agencies out there that have been, absolutely toying and doing terrible, unconstitutional, just dirty, like USSR, China type, everything that we were ever brainwashed as kids in doing in terms of the deep state, right? Like the deep state, the propaganda machines and fake news and all this other kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, intelligence, military intelligence, what I can tell you right now is an effing joke. People are like, well, we had military intelligence and you don't have to do it. Man, you can tell I am going to just be revved up. I'm going to try to watch my language as much as possible, but I am beside myself right now with just this, fierceness in terms of peace. I'm going to have a hard time a lot of times pulling myself back a little today.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people are having a hard time with, and not to just put you into the fray with everybody else out there, because you talk about the alphabet soup. I'm just talking about like Uncle Jim Bob and Sarah on Facebook, who are jumping to conclusions. But I do think it is normal that we have a heightened sense of frustration or fear or anger, whatever it is, and it does make us very often, us included, make mistakes out there.
So I think Banks and I have kind of pre-planned a lot of the structure of this show. A lot of the content is going to flow somewhat naturally from in the beginning. We're going to go through President Trump's address on this particular strike. We are going to get into some other videos from political pundits.
We've got Thomas Massey. Then we're going to go in the time machine back to 1983 and hear from another guy who you guys have heard before. Surprise.
Little guy named Ron Paul. And I'm sure it's a shocker with that sign over there. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the quotes that have come out from the public figures on this, on, I guess, a lot of the spectrum out there. We're also going to get into the Founding Fathers and where they stood on war powers and why this is such a big damn deal. And then we're going to get into the Facebook stuff. And, I think maybe some people may think that, I'm up in arms about the Facebook stuff. I'm not. I don't care when people call me names, right? Like, if you're calling me names, it's because you're out of facts and your argument's lost. Because if you got facts on your side and you want me to understand your point of view, you're going to relay those facts. You're not going to just sit there and call people names. So we're going to get into a bunch of that. I mean, I got a ton of hate. And, people, we're parting ways, but that's later in the show. And it's going to be a ton of fun. But now, I mean, go ahead.
No, I wish, so my wish, which is impossible, and most of my wishes are, that's why I had a podcast about peace, liberty, and free markets.
A bunch of wishes
would be to get all the people who comment on Facebook in a negative and positive light, and have a discussion until we had an understanding, whether we agree or not. Mm-hmm. It's not possible to do that, but I do think it is useful to have a certain outlook when you're dealing with people. I don't think Facebook is just like the hell of the world where nothing happens with bad things. I think it is part of society. And I think there is a way that we can make it better. And talking about it, I think we'll maybe strive to do that.
Yeah. I would. I mean, I'd almost put out the invite to anybody that isn't violent. If you think you got a real case, to come in here and sit. Maybe some of our older, some of the guests that have already been on the show. If you disagree, man, I'd love to have you sit down and tell me where I'm wrong.
Older guest, if you think that your Facebook comment was very
past guest, not older.
Past guest, you said older.
I can't.
It's a trap. Shane made me fall into a trap.
We are going to try to stay as lighthearted through this as possible, obviously, because life is a tragic comedy, in my point of view, and I think that this world needs a lot more of this, other than the mudslinging and all that nonsense that we hear from everybody on both sides out there. Especially the main two parties, quote unquote. Not that they're different, but exactly the same. So,
well, before we get into the head of one party, and it's a pretty long video that we're going to cut up, just to say, if you think that your Facebook comment has been lost in the shuffle, and you made a great point, like, send an email with your point. You can record some audio, you can film yourself, and we might play it if we think it's pertinent.
Yeah, and like we said, this might be a marathon. In terms of delivering it to you guys logistically, I've got two thoughts. We can either put it in two parts, or we can make one long ass show for the week, and you guys can digest it at your own pace. So Banks and I will probably get it with that off air and figure it out, and then you guys will just take it because that's free, and free stuff is the best. So anyway,
so do you want me to play the video, or do you want to play the video?
I've got it queued up. I've only got the one video, so if it's straining your computer over there, we'll do it from here.
Actually, download it to my computer. It's safe in here.
Wow,
posterity
down here in the bunker. Ready?
Go ahead.
Go, Trump.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. As president, my highest and most solemn duty is the defense of our nation and its citizens. Last night, at my direction, the United States military successfully executed a flawless precision strike that killed the number one terrorist anywhere in the world, Qasem Soleimani.
All right, I got to stop right away. What is the president's number one duty, period?
To uphold the Constitution.
As is everybody else's in government that swears an oath per Article 6, Section 3 to uphold the Constitution. It's real simple. Your job as the commander-in-chief, once a declaration of war has been passed by Congress, is then to be the admiral or the general or the grand leader of the military forces once that plan has been put into action by Congress. This happens all the time. I hear people, quote unquote, on the right, the progressive right now, saying his only job is his main job is to defend this nation. It's not.
Well, so I'm playing devil's advocate, and
sure.
It's much easier than usual because I've had people making all these points for a few days now, and I think that they would argue that is the goal of. If they're being reflective, that is the goal of the Constitution, is for protection, right? There's basically only one thing. I mean, there's war, peace, foreign commerce, and
war, peace, foreign commerce, and trade.
Thank you. But war and peace are like the big chunk of that.
And negotiations, I'm sorry.
And so if the president's supposed to uphold the Constitution is supposed to protect us, like that would be a minimal thing. I see the dangerous, like, slippery slope, right? The slippery slope is, if that is the number one priority, then these other things which are less important, like liberty, for example, can take a back seat with, I don't know, things like the Patriot Act or whatever.
And that's exactly how the Patriot Act came to be.
So I think phrasing it that way might let people understand, hey, if protection is the number one thing, protecting liberty is at least just as important as protecting your body, because if you don't have liberty, your body's worth your
Less.
body life is worth
less. Worth less.
Well, worth less and a smaller amount, because you still, and the only reason I make that point is because I believe that human beings have meaning and purpose, and there are a bunch of great books like this, but the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn. That's badly pronounced, the whole thing.
Okay.
But and a lot of what his books are great for is that they show that even in like the most dire circumstances, like gulags in Serbia, where they're eating like a small piece of bread a day,
maybe,
like they've got like a reason to live, which is that human beings inherently, in my opinion, have purpose and meaning.
Yeah. Or using that small piece of bread to catch a rat that they can eat raw.
Something else.
I mean, so yeah, and I think you hit on a point. You get myopic.
I do. I just
Yeah.
think that those people, and I don't mean to like be like arrogant, but those people
Yes.
maybe need to be reminded that protection doesn't just mean from other people. You can be completely safe in a prison cell, and your life is worth less, as we made the point.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
and that might help people come to our side and be like, hey, look, we can be friends here.
And when I say worthless, in the eyes of the government, you are worthless. I think that is the great lie, not in a great way, but in a terribly
A grand lie.
The grand lie is government is here to protect life, liberty, and property. It's not. Government exists to foment and grow government. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't. The president of the United States does not care about you.
Well,
he doesn't.
I think that is more of a nuance. I think that we could agree. So I think a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, and that's why I'd say I think we could agree that maybe government is like a cancer. I'm telling you, if you try to talk to a cancer,
Sure.
you can, all the speeches, the best speeches, the Mahatma Gandhi speeches, the Martin Luther King speeches, the cancer is not going to listen to you. Government as an entity doesn't listen to you because it's not an entity. It doesn't have ears. Cancer doesn't have ears. Same difference.
It doesn't. I think, from that perspective, as you can be completely safe, like you pointed out. You can't, but even in prison,
as close to.
Yeah, like everything's provided for you. You have no rights. You have no responsibility. Nothing like that exists. You are worthless to them at that point. You're not only worthless, now you're a liability, right? And let's face it, when we look at ledgers, right, as the government does a lot of times, that ledger, if you're not an asset, a liability is disposable.
Well, you've made that point multiple times during your campaign. You made it about veterans having universal health care for veterans and how that puts veterans as a liability on the column for government.
Yeah.
And I would kind of argue that when we're in such a
predicament,
it's something else. When such a feedback loop of the media saying things, the officials saying things, and the public reacting more than usual, that makes us kind of a PR liability for the government, depending on what side you're taking.
Sure.
Okay. Shane and I, and hopefully most people who listen, and I would say most people who are anti-war, are kind of a liability, which is why we get the things we're getting right now, which we're going to go into. Well, I mean, the hate, but also the PR, because there is some like amazing PR. I mean, you've got everybody's commenting. Some people at the direction, like the Mike Pences of the world, and some people who are just, for one reason or another, ill-informed or in their own interest. I'm talking about, the commentators like us, but who are on the more progressive right side, just putting out garbage. Like there's one I saw. It's Robert Downey Jr. and he's got like his head back, and it says, "When your tax dollars go to kill terrorists."
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that terrorists are good. This is no defense of terrorists, but that is, war propaganda of epic proportion.
Yeah.
So
I agree. All right. So here's DT.
Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him. Under my leadership, America's policy is unambiguous to terrorists who harm or intend to harm any American. We will find you. We will eliminate you. We will always protect our diplomats, service members, all Americans, and our allies. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its ruthless Quds Force under Soleimani's leadership has targeted, injured, and murdered hundreds of American civilians and servicemen.
All right, I got to stop, man.
So I think the first part is about the imminent attack. What do you think about that, Shane?
We're getting into it's pre-crime again.
So I guess in the Constitution,
yes,
because a lot of people, since that has been our argument, and I didn't mean to take over here, but
it's
real
okay.
fast, in the Constitution, is there we know about the authorization of war. To perform acts of war, you have to go to Congress.
Yeah,
that is just...
I'm going to get into the mechanics of the Constitution.
Is there anything that says that imminent attacks have a different approach? Because there have been some people who at least acknowledge the war, we have to ask Congress, but they're like, hey, he was protecting America from dying right there.
I'll tell you, after extensive years of study of the framers, the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, the writings of the time, and these are the guys that sat together in the constitutional conventions and had these debates. Mm-hmm. I don't read it anywhere. I don't read about preemptive war. I read stories and stories and stories like the Barbary pirates attacking and killing and taking and raping and doing things like that over and over and over again before Jefferson ever got a response. And I'll get into those quotes at some point. But it's like there is no preemptive strike. There is no authorization per Article 2 that gives him any power to do anything without Congress.
So I'm saying under the hypothesis that Trump knew that Soleimani could press a button and something was going to happen. How would this be different than Trump ordering the Navy to stop, I don't know, some huge Iranian boat a mile off the coast of South Carolina?
He doesn't have that power. That's the thing is,
even if a boat was a mile off the coast of South Carolina?
How many times have we been a mile off of Iran's coast? That people need to see this from a couple different perspectives, right? When you look at the map of quote unquote American assets, mm-hmm. Where do you see them?
They're all around Iran. I mean, they're all around the world. They're not actually all around. They're all around the world.
They're all around the world. We are in over 100 different countries. I think we have over 300 different bases or asset type areas, right? With it, we have people with guns who will defend those places. And that doesn't even begin to count all the, that for lack of a better term, like, CIA type houses, alphabet soup type houses that are out there that nobody even knows about, dark houses. And so when we look at this and, the provocation that somehow we are absolutely innocent and in all of this as Americans, we shouldn't be there in the first place. We shouldn't be anywhere in the region. We should, yes, are there embassies and are those kind of a holdover from an older time where you had foreign emissaries that could communicate on behalf of the United States? Sure. Is that even needed in today's age? You don't need it.
That's a cool conversation, actually. I don't think it is needed. It was brought to my attention. I knew that it was a huge embassy.
Yeah.
It cost $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
But it's the size of the Vatican, which was brought to my attention.
140 acres. I've been there, man.
104 acres.
104? Anyway,
one or the other.
I'm telling you, you should see the palaces, the lakes. You should see
within the embassy.
Yeah, within the compound, man. This is kind of where the whole green zone used to be. The enormity of these places somewhat rivals the Pentagon, right? And I'll tell you what, man. I had this crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy thought the other night where I was like, "Geez, oh Pete, look at if you were if you wanted to write a novel, right? Like one of these Tom Clancy type novels on a grand scale, mm-hmm. Think about all the money we have poured into bases, forward operating bases, houses, places like this $1 billion facility in Iraq. Mm-hmm. think about all that. Now, you've just set up a giant infrastructure, and when you leave the region in a vacuum, who takes that over?
I mean,
possibly Iran.
Possibly people you don't like. Well, isn't that what they're
the Persian Empire
scared is happening in the first place?
Yeah, the caliph.
But I mean, that's what we do. We keep creating this idea, and I've heard the point by some intelligent people. It's like, okay, so it is. I told this Shane before we started. You can listen to people like Scott Horton, who we've had on the show, and I will cite the show, by the way, because it will help you understand what's going on right now. But you can go and he'll name all the names out there of all the generals, of all the head of all the militias, and it will make your head spin even if you pay attention to what's going on, right? But to make it a little bit simpler, there's like the Sunnis and the Shiites, and for more than, but at least in my lifetime, for this like war on terror, using air quotes here, war on terror, we've just gone back and forth. Like, okay, we're going to be on the side of the Sunnis, and we're gonna destroy the Shiites, and then the Shiites, and then we're like, oh, but the Shiites can't have power, so we're going to be on the side of the Shiites, and we're going to destroy the Sunnis, and it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you would think something so simple, like I can understand this, right? I can understand. There's two parties. It's more complicated. There's a bunch of militias. Some are funded by different groups, and some are more local Iraqis, because some people there might not like us either.
They have issues too.
Yeah, exactly. If you lived in that era, you'd have issues too.
The Sunnis and the Shiites have issues, not on a more of a grand, exasperated scale than the Democrats and the Republicans.
Well, there's that, but there's also all the other people in the same, like, it's actually a good comparison to American politics. Like, you got the Democrats and Republicans, but there's all these other groups. There's the LGBT groups. There's the libertarians. There's the libertarians who think that the other libertarians suck.
Yeah,
they do.
You're right. Yes,
there's all this going on, but even I can understand. It's like, well, if you're just looking at it from a simplistic view, and there's two parties, and you never want any of them to have power, but the conflict method is to back one.
Yeah.
When does it ever end?
It doesn't. And you kill it there, because you can go back to episode 97. It's Iran, the sound of war in the Gulf. We did an extensive deep dive back into the 1900s when British BP, basically British Petroleum, wasn't BP back then, but the British came into Iran and said, hey, you give us this land to extract your oil, produce it, refine it, and ship it. We'll give you 10%. You don't have to lift a finger. Ever since then, you can go back and you can see in 1949, 1950 to 1953, that's the first CIA coup. None of this happened in a vacuum, right? So if you exasperate for, I don't know, let's say 70 plus years now, 70, and I'm being kind because the coup didn't occur till 1952, 1953, and that was the first CIA coup that ever happened, and it was in Iran. Now, you take U.S. influence, U.S. military power, U.S. State Department, CIA, DEA, FBI, all these guys that play in that region. You take those guys, and you do the same thing here in America for 70 years. Democrats and Republicans are no different from the Sunni and the Shiite. They're killing the hell out of each other.
But Shane, that was so long ago, Shane.
We're so comfortable here in the United States right now that we don't feel those kind of pressures, right? But I'm telling you, you exasperate that by having foreign intervention, surrounding your country with sanctions and everything else for 70 years. This country is completely different, and it's probably a lot more in line with what Iran has done.
Yeah, I want to make sure that people know that, I'm going to speak for Shane because I know he agrees, that just because we explain why certain things may happen doesn't mean that we justify any government of the actions that they take for those reasons, right? Okay, just because there was a coup in Iran back in the day that destabilized the country and made things worse for humanity doesn't mean that justifies any action from the Iranian government harming anybody.
I was about to make that same point. Is we're not condoning violence. We're not condoning acts of war. We're not condoning terrorist attacks. We're not condoning any of this kind of stuff. We're trying to give perspective in history of what's happened. It's not as simple as this guy is over here and he's going to attack an American embassy. That's it. It's not that simple.
Well, so that actually goes back to the point, and I might have missed it. Like, the way I explained it might have come across weird, but the difference I wanted to make is if there's a defensive action, and that's why, like, if they're on the coast of South Carolina, 1 mile away. I don't know why I chose South Carolina. That would be a defensive action at that point.
I don't think it would. Have they?
Well, we have this.
Have they struck us? That's the thing. Is they? Is there something in the air that's going to strike America?
I think that if they were that close and that far away from where they are, the point making is that we're scaring them, right?
Sure, we are.
So if they were that close and within our 1 mile would be like well within. There's that maritime.
Yes, they would be within our. Yes.
So they're outside of international waters and our waters, basically.
Yeah.
That would be defensive. And the next point would be, okay, so there was an attack on the embassy. There's so many things that people are using to justify this that I'm trying to like go point by point.
Sure.
Then there's the attack on the embassy.
We can get into that with Facebook.
The attack of the embassy was stopped, right? Like it ended at some point.
Mm-hmm.
There's like
there's a gap. He wasn't flinging hot lead at our embassy when he got struck, right? Like, okay, your embassy's in trouble. I totally understand. Call in the airstrike and stop the embassy and American lives from being attacked.
And even if you believe that a war should happen, right? That the attack on the embassy, which I'm not saying is a good thing, I'm saying that I could understand why it happened. Mm-hmm. This was a culmination that a lot of people thought would happen before, of like, oh, there's all these different groups, right? Not just Sunnis and Shiites, but all the local militias. Most of them at some point have been allied with us or fighting at the same time. That's what you call an ally, but some people might not like me to say, well, they weren't officially allied, whatever. At this was like the moment, like you're rolling the dice and you've got all sixes, like you're playing Yahtzee. And all sixes means at one point, just the stars aligned and they were all against us at the same time.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know why it didn't happen before, but it happened. They talked about this escalation. Oh, they evacuated the embassy. That's what governments do. Like they evacuate pretty easily. Okay, it starts. There's like a snowflake in Atlanta. Like evacuate Atlanta.
Stay home. Okay? Get your milk and bread sandwiches.
And however bad it was, if it was that bad, I would contend to some degree it ended. And even if you think there needs to be retaliation, and that's a dangerous word, retaliation, revenge, and vengeance, dangerous words.
Thou shalt not
kill. At
that
point, it is not self-defense anymore. In the same way that if somebody comes and shoots me in the head and Shane kills them at that moment, that's self-defense. But if that person runs away and the cops find him a week later and can subdue him without killing him, they're supposed to. Because we don't just get to decide random things. That's why we have a system, however flawed I think it wholly is.
Yeah.
So we have a system with kind of rules and so forth. And if as soon as something bad happens, we violate the rules, why do we have the rules in the first place? I don't know.
I don't either. And I'm baffled by people that think that it's okay. So we'll let DT continue here.
Yeah, I know I got off.
That's good.
The recent attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq, including rocket strikes that killed an American and injured 4 American servicemen very badly, as well as a violent assault on our embassy in Baghdad, were carried out at the direction of Soleimani. Soleimani made the death of innocent people his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over.
Could you pause?
Soleimani has been perpetrating.
So I'm hopefully a quick point. Like, I don't know how anybody would argue that Soleimani was like a good guy, but you know who's just as bad and who we have mentioned before? Jinping. Is that his name? China. Yeah. We've talked about on the show where he takes and kidnaps Muslims to concentration camps where their children come back to their towns and find them empty, where they have a whole plan of how to explain why their loved ones aren't there anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, that's freaking evil. Do we think that government is that good at eradicating evil without creating worse consequences? That's why we didn't put government, at least our government, in charge of all the affairs.
Is government evil? Yes. Now, will they want to destroy other evil governments? Of course they will, for their own evil purposes, right? So to think that this is somehow okay because we think some other government's evil. Well, yeah, okay, I agree, right? I agree. Most government's evil. Like at its very root, government is evil. Because I said it's the grand lie. It's there to protect your life, liberty, and property at best, and it's not. It's there to extract wealth and time from individuals. Now, this is very interesting. One of our listeners who has some connections, and I have actually reached out to some of my sources who still work in the region over there in Iraq, confirm this. This is a very interesting read, and I want to bring it up at this point because this needs to be looked into. Okay. It really needs to be looked into. I was recently working at the Iraq base that was mortared a few nights ago. There is a perimeter road between the base and an airport that no one was allowed to drive down for at least 7 to 8 years. While I was there in Iraq a couple of months ago, the powers that be decided to open the perimeter road to the general population. Why? There is no possible way leadership in the DOS did not know that would put the base in danger. The base has been mortared a couple of times now from a location along a previously inaccessible route. The most recent mortar attack in the base hit strategically into one of the armories and killed 4 military members and immediately struck 4 military members, 1 contractor that we've been told about. The coalition forces immediately struck back and cleared the area. Then our government fired back in Iran. Now, of course, there are riots across Iraq and Baghdad. It's crap like this that does not make me believe that we have people in power who put our lives at risk and kill our service members and contractors in order to take a defensive approach and retaliate with arms. If the U.S. attacks Iran without cause, it would look bad. But look, they attacked us first. But who really allowed this attack to happen? People were killed in a mortar attack that was entirely preventable. Why open the roads again? What was the point when our threat levels were still high? It was an insensible and heedless decision, but not without intent. Not sure what my point is, but I'm feeling upset and unsettled by what is narrated in the news versus what I know to be true from recently being there and still having my friends there. It's just a big chess game for DC. Those roads should never have been opened or reopened, and we all knew it would be coming.
So what's
This is reminiscent for me where I had my eyes opened by the Battle of Najaf. This person who has been part of the MIC for as long as they have, see it as plain
MIC?
as military industrial complex.
Okay.
They see that things are not congruent. Things that are preventable, things that...
Well, the thing is that you can actually... I appreciate that. I'm not trying to... Yeah. I don't know who this person is or anything, but I appreciate that. But the whole thing is based on, hey, if you put yourself in an impossible situation... Okay, we talk about this, about law enforcement and military quite often. If you put yourself in a place where people don't want you for long enough...
20 years, almost.
What is going to happen? So the whole foundation, like the principle of the matter is... this is a dangerous position. So if on top of that, and of course there's human beings around there, so there can be eras, but as we know from history, governments and people who have unfortunately put way too much confidence in government are not immune from justifying putting other people's lives below their goals.
Of course.
There's people like Madeleine Albright who literally said it on live TV that not even before it happened made the justification, but after it happened, confirmed that the justification was worth it. You've got people like Newt Gingrich who before the Iraq War II? No, Iraq War III is what I've heard it called before by Scott Horton, was saying that, well, maybe we need to have another type of 9/11 type thing so that the public will stop being like too anti-war. Like these are on video occurrences. So if I was somebody there, even if I didn't have proof, it's something that I would worry about all the time about, well, how valuable do I feel like they're they're assessing my life.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem like a lot, again, for me, from the foundation of being there in the first place.
I couldn't
in the same way that it is not that nobody, the people who are telling law enforcement to go to drug houses or even a random person's house to stop them from doing a peaceful act, like that doesn't make, that person is not caring about your life that much if they really think that the world is so dangerous and that and that you might get shot.
We are all.
I don't even think when they tell cops to go stop people for speeding, and apparently it's so dangerous that they always have to be thinking that you're like a killer and that's why they put guns on you and so forth. I don't think they're valuing your life that much.
We're pawns, man. This is just textbook. This is the way the system works, man. This is the way the MIC works. This is the way the intelligence, quote unquote, works. This is the way everything that's connected to the damn deep state alphabet soup there is. This, I mean, when you know it and you can see it, it's just plain as day to you.
You know what's even worse that I'm realizing right now is, just like many other things, it's because our standard is so skewed. Those people, not all the military, not all the law enforcement, might actually feel safer because other lives have been made to be even less valuable than theirs. So it's
innocence.
The people who get thrown in jail for smoking a plant, the people who are told that, oh, you just comply with law enforcement officers, you go to jail, you go to prison, and then you can fix it later. Do you know how freaking dangerous jail and prison are to, at the very least, your mental health?
To a family? Yeah. I know.
So if our lives have been so devalued, they might just think that their lives are being normally valued, when it's not true. Everybody's life is being highly devalued.
Yep. Yeah.
Except for a tiny small amount of people.
Here we go.
Of terror to destabilize the Middle East for the last 20 years. What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago. A lot of lives would have been saved. Just recently, Soleimani led the brutal repression of protesters in Iran, where more than 1,000 innocent civilians were tortured and killed by their own government.
Not defending Soleimani. I'm not defending Soleimani. I don't know how more we can say this. We're not defending him. What we're taking objection to is a unilateral action by an executive. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and in a more free world, maybe, and this is maybe me making myself feel better, if we could see what was going on in other countries and we didn't do things that are not of our purview, legally and I think morally, because I would like to support Iranians getting rid of somebody who does atrocious things. I'd like Iran to have a small, limited government at best.
We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war. I have deep respect for the Iranian.
His Jedi mind trick stuff needs a lot of work.
So this is where I thought we might disagree. I actually think that it's worth taking him at his word. I'm not saying he's taking the right actions, but if you look at history, right? History is the best predictor of the future, and like a preponderance of evidence type approach. Trump has, even though he hasn't followed through very well, but the first thing you heard on this podcast, by the way, before I said the Rebellion episode 152, was Trump in 2011. And he's had many tweets talking about how Obama shouldn't go to war with Iran, how Obama's just going to Iran to get reelected, or he's going to start a war with Iran to get reelected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. His whole campaign was, these wars are stupid. I don't think any of that has actually changed. He's not necessarily coming to it from the right perspective, not as much peace, not as much thinking as individuals. He tends to focus first on the costs and like the trade-offs, right? Negotiation wise. I don't think, as much as that's not perfect, I don't think any of that has changed in his mind of how he would assess like the value of things. And even though he's failed at removing all the troops from Syria like he said he should and stopping the wars and so forth, he has done it. He has gone to the other side and listened to the Pompeos and Bolton and so forth less than I would have expected of a typical Republican president. And that makes me believe that if he were to choose, like his preference would be, I'm going to look like the biggest, strongest guy out there, and that's going to stop these things. I actually do believe that is his mindset. I think it would be stronger if he had a declaration of war that I wouldn't want actually to be voted to be approved. And I think that would be an even stronger position of force if he understood what force actually looked like, because it can't just all about be might. There has to be some moral standing too. That shows force as well. I think it would be stronger if he had both of those. But I do think that's what he believes. And to some weird credit, like his plan works out, he's getting some of that moral strength, even though it's corrupted, from Americans being so damn gung-ho about going to war.
Some.
A lot.
And I think it's more of just defense at this point. It's like that knee-jerk defense reaction, the way they're selling it, the way the propaganda machines are spinning it, and everything else. So I'm a lot more skeptical. I'm telling you, man. Because this is just as plain as day to me, I don't think Trump was ever at odds with Bolton or Pompeo. I don't. I think Trump's a populist. I think he's been a populist ever since he realized that you can do anything with numbers. If you know where the numbers are and you know where people are polling, you can get away with about damn near anything. And I think he has done that as a master of being a populist.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt that he's got the military for the most part, and people who are related to military members and the cops and the bikers and, quote unquote, the tough guys kind of on his side. But I don't think he's ever been at odds with the MIC or the deep state. I think what you're seeing right now is an implosion of the American empire, right? When we were leaving off the year, Trump was going to be impeached, right? And the impeachment.
Well, Trump was impeached.
Yeah. Okay. So Trump's impeached, but let's look at it objectively. For people in Congress who control the budget, who absolutely impeached President Trump, mm-hmm. They gave him more money than any president has ever gotten before, ever.
That's also a continuation and a preponderance of, and you can assess it as a preponderance of evidence of, that's the truth. They don't care.
They don't really care.
And that's what they do all the time. The same way I assess Trump. Same thing.
But it can't be both, right?
What can't be both?
It can't be both.
What are the opposing things?
We don't trust this guy. We don't trust this guy. This guy is a criminal. He deserves to be, tried before the Senate and kicked out of office is what, the Congress has said. At least the House of Representatives has said.
The majority. Okay, yeah.
Okay. So, but they also, at the same time, get in line and give him more money to do whatever the hell he wants to do with the executive branch than any other executive. So, I see your point. In my crayon-eating brain, I have these two diametrically opposed positions. He's either the most worthless piece of trash, lying son of a bitch that ever walked the earth, and he needs to be impeached and ran out of town and maybe even jailed, or we love this guy more than anybody. Let's give him more damn money to go do whatever the hell he wants in this world.
So I think that comes from the thing that I said earlier about somebody. I think they unfortunately just trust government. Government is this other thing that they both like, right?
Who's they? The people?
Trump and the House of Representatives. They both do this.
They are the government, right?
Well, but we're talking about their actions as people, right?
Sure.
Congress is 435, 535.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Their actions as people, and then Trump's action as a individual person, even though he's got people around him too. Sure. All those people, the reason that they're making these, what we see as diametrically opposed ideas, right?
Yeah.
Is because they trust government. They want the same. They trust the same thing. They both want the same thing. So that gets put to the side.
We can't turn it off. We won't get reelected.
And really, to some degree, you could forgive them 2% because this has been the continuation of how things go forever.
Yeah. But if I'm Congress and I want to really neuter this guy, I want to send a real message as the Democrats and send it to not only him but the world. I cut this guy off financially. I cut him off.
Again, you're being way too logical.
I know I am, but the fact is, this is what has happened. This is a transition of this. These facts are indisputable.
Oh, I completely agree.
And they happened.
But crazy things happen. That politics is us pointing out crazy things. That's literally what we do. We're like, those people are crazy. Those people are crazy. This is that's insane.
I think it just goes to my point is you're seeing an empire implode right now. And I think the impeachment is a show. I think everything that the quote unquote the Democrats, there is some moral outrage, and whipping and people being fervored into this frenzy to divide a nation because it is falling. You have to have a divided nation as an empire falls so that there is a side that will win. And trust me, it ain't the people who are going to win. In this case, what we're seeing is wagging the dog all over the place. Impeachment didn't work. Most of America is still anti-war. And it's way past time to bring the troops home, right?
I think that most of America was anti-war before this happened.
Long time ago.
No, like before Soleimani happened. And it might not be like a significantly, like much less of America is anti-war today. Like that happened, and within 3 days, the amount of people who are anti-war like was cut by whatever huge percentage.
Yeah, the retarded, and I say that as people who are not dumb people. They just have been retarded in their studies, in their understanding of what is really going on out there. And so, yeah, I see people who are easily shifted and led and directed at other people.
But I mean, back to Trump, I still think that he's an individual, and the thing that has caused the things we've liked about him, right? So we've mentioned a few. He tried to make peace with North Korea. He was somewhat anti-war a little bit. He's made the deep state kind of mad. Those kind of things come from the fact that he doesn't have the exact same principles as us, but he has more independence and more focus on himself than other presidents have in the past. And I think that is what makes me able to think that he still doesn't want war. I think he's more intelligent in the fact, or at least self-centered, that he can see the future and he can be like, you know what? If I'm going to be remembered fondly or greatly, at least by the largest amount of people ever, those people are usually people who have stopped wars, right? Mm-hmm. Who at least the wars have stopped because of them in the way history has written it. And history doesn't always write it correctly, but you can play off of that. I still think that is the underlining factor. It doesn't mean that he doesn't get a ton of bad advice on all ways. And again, I think that would be, if that's his goal, which I think it is, it would be even better if he got authorization from Congress. Not better for us, better just from his perspective, better for him. And I think that people clamoring for more strength, maybe they're not clamoring for war directly, and supporting him in this, are doing him that favor. And he probably knew that that's what was going to happen, because you've got people like the Mike Pences right next to him, the Charlie Kirks removed from him, and all the Instagram, Facebook, Republican commentators. I don't mean to put commentators down because that's what we do, who are just like on the bandwagon. He knew that those people were going to be able to make that happen.
Maybe. I'm just cynical. I mean, like I said, I don't need to restate it. Maybe we'll disagree on that point, but I'm just cynical of the guy, and now more than ever, because
I understand.
I think this provocation is something that, you can spin it one way as we're avoiding war here. We're not. One man.
Oh, I don't think we are in the end. No, I just think that's his goal.
I just think one man should never, ever be able to lead a nation into war at his own whim.
I also agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
People, they are a remarkable people with an incredible heritage and unlimited potential. We do not seek regime change. However, the Iranian regime's aggression in the region, including the use of proxy fighters to destabilize its neighbors, must end, and it must end now. The future belongs to the people of Iran, those who seek peaceful coexistence and cooperation, not the terrorist warlords who plunder their nation to finance bloodshed.
Pot.
Everything. Go ahead and say it, man, because
pot, kettle.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, Jesus. I don't even need to comment.
Yeah.
Abroad, the United States has the best military by far anywhere in the world. We have the best intelligence in the world. If Americans anywhere are threatened, we have all of those targets already fully identified and I am ready and prepared to take whatever action is necessary. And that in particular refers to Iran. Under my leadership, we have destroyed the ISIS territorial caliphate, and recently American special operations.
Because that's really funny. You know who at one point helped defeat ISIS caliphate?
This guy, Soleimani.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like the contact. He was the main POC. You want to know why they knew where he was? Because they were working with him.
I mean, and that's actually one of the points that that you need to understand is what I said earlier about the Sunnis and the Shiites and the back and forth, and the way that they're justifying this number that they've used. This is from Scott Horton again. He tweeted it out yesterday. He tweeted out, so they say it's 500, that Soleimani is responsible for 500 American deaths, right? Then they say 600, then they say close to 1,000. The premise under this, if you're going to make, and this is where skepticism needs to come back, if you're going to make statements, you should at least, maybe you don't have to prove it you should
measure them.
You should at least explain what you mean by that.
Yeah.
And what they mean by that is anybody who died at the hand of a Shiite was Soleimani's responsibility at that point. So anybody, when there's only two sides, that's not a reasonable assertion when there are so many different militias here and groups in Syria and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, and you look at, he was responsible for 500 deaths. Well, that's I don't even believe. I cherish every life.
Nobody has explained on TV.
Yeah.
What they mean by that, which 500 by whom, and nobody has given proof of that either.
No, and that's, you're exactly right. All the talk about, there was an American drone that was down, tankers were attacked, and all these things that were not U.S. basically not U.S. assets for the most part, or U.S. troops or anything like that, were never ever touched. I don't know, man. The idea that 500 even begins to compare to all the innocent lives that have been absolutely destroyed, and we're talking about probably somewhere in the ballpark of 1 million plus by the U.S. and the region and our allies, man. You can hear it in me, man. It just, nobody, the perspective, the lack of completeness in this entire thing is so subjective to me that it's just about as damn evil as it gets.
Well, I hate the position that it puts us in having to, well, I shouldn't hate it, because talking about facts shouldn't be something that you hate.
Sure.
But it is very uncomfortable to have to be the person who says, hey, these lives matter too, because everybody hears it as, well, those lives don't matter. No, all the lives matter. It's all bad. And our main goal, or my main goal, I'm pretty sure it's Shane's goal too, is to point out the ways that less lives will be lost in the future.
Yep.
And I care about, man, this shows how messed up I am, because I pause when I'm going to say, I care about Iranian lives and Iraqi lives just as much as I care about American lives. Now, I care about your life, Shane, and
Sure.
my family's life,
Yeah.
and like my little sister's life, the life I care the most about. But if I'm talking about people I don't know, I care about the lives the same.
Yeah.
If you're American or Iraqi or Iranian, it doesn't matter. Outside of the people that I know.
I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of people out there that put a lot of credence in the words of old JC, right? Jesus Christ. Whether you do or whether you don't, there are some great teachings, and thou shalt not kill or murder are some of the greatest, right? And those, the what is it? The meek will inherit the earth. If you can't feel something for kids who live in squalor and filth and starvation and just places in with people that you cannot even fathom, the smells, the sights, the horrors, the instability, the recklessness that life is treated with. I want you to imagine a little kid that you know. I want you to imagine somebody's son or daughter or somebody that you were close to growing up, living in those type of conditions that were fomented and basically the great American empire's conquest put them in a lot of those situations through acts of war like sanctions or overt war, overt strikes, overt occupation. I'm not saying that I hate the military. I don't. There are a lot of people in there that they've never been presented with this point of view. What I'm saying is as Americans with the biggest club out there, we got to be a lot more damn responsible with what we've done. And for me, I can see it plain as day because I've witnessed it. I've seen it up close and personal. And if your heart doesn't go out to those kids who have been put in those positions and their lives that are lost in the genius and everything else that will never, ever, ever be seen in this world, man, you need to check exactly where your heart is. You need to go back to first principles, and you need to really understand those things, because I don't know how you can call yourself a Christian if you're not thinking about those things. Your tax money, your thoughts, your provocation, your words out there in social media egging this kind of crap on, it is absolutely abhorrent and disgusting.
So it's interesting what you said made me think of Sawyer, actually. So I was trying to listen to your voice, and so I just took the first kid that I thought about, and she was so excited to see me this morning. It made me feel all good. So she's the first one that came to mind. And so I tried to put her in a position that I would think would be horrible. And the first thing that came to mind is that people justify these actions, right? And so I was like, okay, well, so you're saying that there's good intentions, right? Good intentions. But if you think about it, if you think about somebody that you care about and you picture them in like a horrible situation, right? Do the good intentions matter anymore? No. And the good intentions don't matter because, well, they're in the past in that sense. And so, what it has created is what we can control, right? Is what we can, well, maybe not control, but have some influence over, right? And say, hey, how about we don't create this again? How about we look at, well, it doesn't matter if there are good intentions. This is what happened because of them. And so if you just do the same thing over and over, the good intentions don't matter. And I think if you picture something in your head like that, maybe it'll make you like reflect on what the priority is. Is it the intentions, or is it like what happens over and over? I think that's really
the road to hell, man.
I would hope that would help some people put it into perspective.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, they say.
And I don't think all the intentions are good on top of it.
Yeah. No.
And then the other point you made about not hating the military made me think of, like, the military is supposed to be defense, right? It's a lot of force, and it's supposed to be about defense. Mm-hmm. What are other things that are about defense? Somebody with a gun. I own a gun. You own a gun. A lot of people in America own a gun. We hear stories about just the other day in Texas where an ex-FBI agent saved a lot of people, it would seem like.
Yeah.
We don't hate people who have force in general, but if people who have force do stupid things, right? If I am waving my gun around, if I am jumping to conclusions and using my gun when I shouldn't, right, for things that don't warrant that amount of force, criticizing those actions would not be hating force or even hating the person necessarily who's taking those actions. It's saying the actions are wrong.
Yeah.
And if you, on top of it, love the person, right, you would want to protect them from doing bad actions, because bad actions have bad consequences. Not only could it foment anger and resentment and bitterness and make this whole conversation much more difficult, because everybody has all these emotions about, one person hates the military, one person hates America, and then the other is like, you hate all brown. Like, it creates a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. But it can cause their death, which has happened.
Yeah.
And even if you don't care a lick about anybody who doesn't have American citizenship, which I think would be wrong, all this, even if it's in smaller numbers, which still matter because life is intrinsically important, will mean more deaths for American people, mostly military people, who are, under my presumption, there for good intentions, mm-hmm. at the very least.
Yeah, and
there's no good angle to say let's do the same thing over and over. And there is no way that you can look at history, recent history, where there's not many, many, many examples of what we're doing is the same thing we've always done.
Yep. Yeah. And I've said it before, man. Until you're presented with that point of view, which is my whole point in all of this, is in the age of in the age of knowledge and the internet, ignorance is a choice, right? I'm not saying that anybody who's in the military at this point, has ever been even exposed to this kind of talk or ideas or anything like that. Because really, if you don't know about it, you don't know about it. It's like it's that planet that's past Pluto, right? That's just floating out there in the solar system. If you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there.
Yeah, and like Einstein said, if you don't know what you don't know, which makes it hard to search necessarily.
The unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to continue with DT here, and then maybe we'll pick up a little bit. We're about an hour in already, so wow. I thought this 4 minutes, 4 minutes and 25 seconds. We've got a little less than a minute left.
And Shane is always more in touch with reality than me because I thought we'd be done in 30 minutes.
No, I knew this was going to take an hour just to get through the first clip.
Has killed the terrorist leader known as al-Baghdadi. The world is a safer place without these monsters. America will always pursue the interests of good people, great souls, while seeking peace, harmony, and friendship with all of the nations of the world. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great military, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, that was quicker than I thought.
Yeah, it ended a little sooner than I thought. Well, yeah, we're not always trying to find peace. Geez, I mean, I don't even need to say anything at the end of that thing. It's just like, geez, Pete, man, like, this is crazy.
I think it's crazy, but I still do appreciate, for whatever degree, that he used those words and says some things that are things that I would echo. Okay.
All right, so that takes us through our first video. Guys, this is gonna be the marathon. In terms of, I hope it's enough content for you this week. We're gonna get into now. You want to do the Massey video?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think after the Massey video, it'll kind of lead you into talking a little bit more about the Constitution, and so forth. Yep. So this is actually not it's not old. It's 3 weeks old. Mm-hmm. No, not 3 weeks. Let's see, 2 weeks old. And so Massey couldn't know that this was happening. I don't think he's on one of the security committees, or stuff like that. But he's so consistent that his words tend to apply to a lot of things. And he pointed out a hypocrisy that Shane pointed out about 20-ish minutes ago about, they say that Donald Trump is the worst thing in the world. They have to impeach him, and they did. And then they've given him a lot of money. So this is Thomas Massey.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, just a few hours ago, this body voted for impeachment. So I rise today to speak about an abuse of power. Congress has the sole power to declare war and the awesome responsibility to decide when, where, and for what purposes our soldiers will be asked to give their lives. 18 years ago, this body misappropriated that power by issuing an open-ended authorization to commit our soldiers to fight anywhere on the globe. The so-called war on terror has claimed the lives of more American soldiers than lives of civilians who were lost on 9/11, not to mention over 100,000 lives of foreigners not associated with terror. In the last week, this chamber has passed over 6,000 pages of legislation and has spent over $1 trillion. Tragically, we just funded the 19th year of the war in Afghanistan without changing or even defining a strategy for winning or ending that war. So I close by indicting this very body for an abuse of power, an abuse of our war powers, and an abuse of our power of the purse. I yield back.
I love that man. Thomas Massey, if you ever hear this, God bless you, man. Thank you. Just thank you very much for having the brass and the spine, the intestinal fortitude, and the principle to speak truth to power to what could be the most powerful body on this planet.
Even more credit goes to him because of when he said it before this happened. There's a consistency about where the priorities should lie. And as much as Massey is like, he's a tech guy, right? He went to MIT, has a bunch of patents.
Smart dude.
Is interested in a bunch of things, is not in the military. He'll still consistently, he has bills about being able to sell meat without going through the FDA.
Yeah, raw milk and meat. And, yeah, you got some apples,
the consistency
I got some money.
still, and the principle still brings him to point out what is true, is that, well, this is like the most important issue, and all the stuff you're doing, your silly impeachment BS and being a hypocrite and so forth, has big ramifications, and he does it in his own way. I'm sure I'd do it in a different way. Shane would definitely do it in a different way. I'm probably like between Massey and Shane. The perfect mix. I'm joking. But
you better lean a lot more towards Massey.
But I have an internal struggle, Shane, that you wouldn't know. I just found that quite an awesome reminder. Somebody shared it on my Facebook. Credit to them. I can't remember who they were. Sorry if it was you. But I thought that was an incredible reminder of the importance of following the law, pointing out the people who don't follow the law, and what they're doing, which you pointed out earlier, which is really cool.
Yeah, just completely hypocritical. I mean, just bald face. Screw the American people. Here's $1.4 trillion in omnibus. How many hours did they have to read this ridiculous bill?
The last one was like 24 hours as usual.
Oh, man. I mean,
actually, Massey had an awesome tweet the other day. So there's this Twitter account called a crime a day.
Yeah. And
they just post a crime a day, usually federal crime a day on their Twitter, right? Or they post a bunch, maybe, I don't know. But they're pretty awesome. And around New Year's, they asked like, hey, what kind of laws would you want to pass? And Massey was like, what do you want to make a crime? And Massey was like, it should be a crime to pass a bill before without having 3 days to read it or something like that.
Yeah.
So Massey is not only principled, he's like got this sassy wit to him.
Yeah, he is very he's very sassy. So we've gone through the Massey video, which perfectly illustrates some of the points we've already made. You've got another video over there by the one and only Ron Paul.
I do. This was a point that I remembered from an old speech of Ron Paul's. Not this one. This is even older. But it goes back to 1983, and we're talking about Marines being in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. This is Beirut. This is the old Beirut's bombing time frame.
Yeah. And so before that, the Marines were deployed there about 2 years before the bombing happened, if my timeline is about correct.
Yep.
And there was a lot of lead up and like more troops, and kind of what's been happening over over the Trump presidency that has led to this, right? Mm-hmm. Moving troops here, moving troops back, this whole like national conversation. And this is Ron Paul after the bombing of Beirut happened.
Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute. Rise and extend my
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, following the bombing of our embassy in Lebanon, there have been statements concerning the need to tighten security at all U.S. embassies in order to protect U.S. diplomatic personnel. No one has suggested an obvious alternative for protecting our foreign service personnel stationed abroad. We should withdraw our diplomatic personnel from volatile areas of the world. In suggesting such a withdrawal, I'm not suggesting the breaking of diplomatic relations with these foreign governments. If the closing of our embassies is impossible, we should at least be taking steps to greatly reduce the scope of their functions. In this era of rapid transportation and instantaneous communications, the role of our embassies and of the ambassadors serving abroad has drastically changed. In previous eras, when communications and travel were slow and cumbersome, the U.S. ambassador made binding policy decisions without consultation with Washington. Nowadays, the decision-making process is centralized in Washington. Ambassadors and embassy personnel merely carry out policy decisions that are made at Foggy Bottom. Modern technology has reduced the need for the large embassies. We must also end the practice of stationing intelligence agents in our embassies. This practice helped to precipitate the hostage crisis in Iran and possibly even in Lebanon. These intelligence agents serve no diplomatic function whatsoever.
So,
makes some great points there.
You echoed one of the points, which is the what's a word when technology is obsolete? The obsolescence of embassies today.
Yeah. When our president or a head of state or the Department of Defense or any of these ridiculous organizations can sit in the privacy of a room with 4K type televisions, maybe even domes, where you have almost a virtual, like, and they exist. They exist. That's the thing, is these type of things exist. They can broadcast these back and forth and have very intimate conversations. I know there's nothing like a handshake and being in the moment with a person. However, 4K gets you pretty damn close.
So you're talking about convenience, a little handshake there. If you could talk about, like, maybe not convenience, optimization. Like, oh no, it should be a handshake based on potential horrible consequences of creating large, huge 104 acre or 40, we don't know, acre,
$1 billion
basically
facilities.
Military compounds.
Yeah, our Pentagon in the Middle East.
That are so powerful that they are fomenting all the parties who used to be allied with us to hate us.
Yeah.
I think with the optimization can be left aside, and I don't even think it's necessarily that valuable. So
it's crazy, man. It's crazy that we on a number of different aspects. One, just being the damn money.
I mean, there's so many aspects. The money is crazy too. But when you're talking about war, it's like so much more important. But there's all these points.
Hey, man. I don't want to go to. Hey, Soleimani and Grand Ayatollah. I don't want to go to war, man. I want to spare a lot of innocent lives. Because this is the conversation I would have. If I was the commander-in-chief, man, this is a conversation. Hey, get me the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini on the phone now or on Skype. Get me a Terp right now. Get me 2 Terps that I can trust that don't know each other. I want this conversation right now because I want to save the lives of innocent men and women all around the region.
You know what? I just thought, I don't know. Like, I would even want to make that public. I'd tell them, hey, I'm talking to you and you can talk too, and this is all being broadcast to the world, because
that'd be badass.
That would be badass.
Holy hell.
Because why shouldn't it?
Why shouldn't it? Put your damn best foot forward and see who is there to make peace.
It's like the government's stupid argument of, like, if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. In this case, what do you actually have to hide if all you're doing is saying, hey, I'm And you can even be a badass if you need to be a badass and end the conversation with, if not, I'll go to Congress and ask them for war because you know what? I'm being such a virtuous, moral person and talking to everybody right now. They'll just jump on board with me right away, which they probably would at that point if it's an open line. And
unbelievable. I love the idea. I love the idea of sitting here in Monday Morning Quarterback in 2020 and saying, holy hell, why are we so archaic? What do you got over there? B3. Oh, you sunk my battleship. What are you talking about? Right? What are we talking about? It is 2020. Have the guts and the balls to sit there and say, hey, man, I don't want to kill innocent men and women and children in your country. What's the problem? What do you need from me to make this all go away so that we can open the lines of communication, not only between us, but the trade, the travel, the exercise of getting humans in contact with each other so that we can be better neighbors?
As flawed as the process was, it's actually what got Trump elected to some degree. Hear me out.
It's got them all elected.
There was all these debates. There's not enough debates, and it's controlled by the Democrat Party and the Republican Party on both sides and so forth. But it was this public thing where the big bad guy, right, was the deep state, and they didn't want Trump elected. I still contend because he's not optimal, because they want optimal, right? And they're scared because they don't want to lose power, all that kind of stuff. And he got to do it publicly, and people kept on being fed the lies, and Trump reacted to the lies with some kind of virtue. Like, he said things that were true, okay? Not all the things, unfortunately, and not in all the right ways, and he has different principles than I have, but he said a lot of things that were true, and because people just heard the truth, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to take the side of the bad guys, which is the deep state and so forth. That's exactly what would happen if the person on the line representing America was just like, hey, don't want to kill people, do believe in defense, let's do this. Everybody's watching. What's the problem? That's what would happen.
I love that idea, man. God, what?
Secrecy is repugnant to a republic, man.
It's repugnant, period. You know, that's the thing.
I even sometimes hear, not that I'm putting myself on a pedestal, but I even sometimes when we talk and don't make it public to the podcast, I'm like, is this kind of manipulative? I don't know. I think about that sometimes.
I'm telling you right now, man, I get back to kids a lot because there's no magical line where stuff changes. It does. You never ever.
Well, hold on. There's one between countries. You know, the borders are really important.
Magical. There's no magical line that removes the first things you're taught or teach children. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. There's no magical line between the state and the citizenry that removes that. There is no magical line between murder, between the state and the citizenry that removes that. I don't know when and where adults fall off this thing, but I can tell you right now.
Really early sometimes.
With secrecy. I can point out the other day, when people whisper in front of me, I can't stand it. It pisses me off, especially if I really know those people. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go any further than that. So I told my kids, because I saw some people whispering the other day, and then they started to do it. I said, don't do it. Don't even think about whispering in front of other people. It's rude. First and foremost, it's rude.
Almost all the time, I would agree. Yeah.
If you can't say what you want to say in front of another person, you've got some real, you shouldn't say it. You definitely shouldn't say it then. Now, I understand. Let me caveat that with, you're being held hostage, and you and somebody else kind of get together and go, hey, man.
Well, there's that.
Imminent danger, right?
And it also depends on what kind of public forum you're in. If you're in just the public in general, then you might not want to.
Yeah, but if
you're everybody here, but if you're in the more private the setting, intimate. the more private and intimate the setting, the less. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just kind of hold it as, in general, you shouldn't be whispering in front of other people.
You know what happens, though, is this is not a point we've made online.
Yeah.
And the people who would come back at us with some hate for saying, what, are you saying that we should just evolve our military strategy? And how are we supposed to we're going to give all our enemies all our intel. And that's inconceivable.
I can't wait.
You naive little
I can't wait to read a thread between me and Tom Frederick. Okay. Tom Frederick's a public person. We've been to his house. He is a really, really nice guy. Mm-hmm. We had a really interesting thread in Facebook, and we'll get through it at some point. But I'm telling you right now, for every time something like that came up, it's so easy to dismantle. It's so easy to dismantle. And it's not because there's dumb. He's not. That guy, I mean, let's face it. You don't make that kind of money and you're stupid, okay? The guy's done a lot of stuff right. Okay? Yes. A lot of stuff right. And I think this is just one of those things, again, where we point out the fact that America, in its ridiculous government indoctrination system, has done its job so effectively that you can take people who have even shrugged it off and made, beat life in terms of finances, that still don't understand this kind of stuff.
I mean, I also think that it's just to be super corny, a part of life that we're not all supposed to know all the same things perfectly, and that makes it interesting for us to interact with each other.
Yeah.
And it's a part of the free market too, this specialization.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing is, I'm not saying you have to trust me. I'm not even asking for you to trust me. I'm asking you, have an open mind, maybe have a listen. That's all I'm asking. If you can present me a better argument, I'm going to take that up, man, because guess what? Next time I go into the ring in the battlefield of ideas, I've got a much better chance at making sure that my side, or whatever it is that I am sitting here making the case for, is a dominant case. And it sounds weird.
No, it's the idea. I believe it's Bosfet who said that the most dangerous thing is not for a cause to be ineptly. For a cause to not attack well, but to be ineptly defended.
Exactly right.
So if you've got ideas that you hold dear, you should work on trying to defend them, while at the same time trying to be able to listen, and maybe some of your ideas aren't perfected and so forth. But yeah, being able to defend your ideas is very important.
Sure.
If you care, if you think your ideas are virtuous, and if you think your ideas are virtuous, even if they're wrong, that's probably what you should do. You should learn how to defend them as best possible.
Yeah. So we have some.
Before that, the reason I played the thing about the Beirut
okay, I'm sorry.
embassy thing was to go into what I thought, and I guess that kind of goes there, but what I thought would be something that what I'm wanting is for people who are jumping to conclusions to slow down for a second, right?
Yeah. Stop.
And I thought that I had a strategy to help them slow down. I was like, who helps Republicans slow down for a second? Ronald Reagan, right? You say Ronald Reagan, everybody says praise.
Oh, I love Ronald Reagan.
Praise be. Right? That's amen.
Yeah, right.
So what happened? So the video that we just played was April 20th, 1983.
Okay.
What happened on February 26th, 1984?
February 26, 1984. That was... Boy, I should know this is right around my birthday. What?
Ronald Reagan.
Reelected?
No, he withdrew all the Marines from Lebanon.
Oh, okay. All right.
So a few months after, it's not a big thing, so I don't mean to put you on the
No.
spot. But a few months after Ron Paul made that speech, coincidence? I don't know. Ronald Reagan decided, after he said that he would never cut and run, that's a quote from Ronald Reagan from years previous. Like,
sure.
Never cut and run. You have to look strong, blah, blah, blah. Sure. There's strength in other things than just pure force. He cut and run. I don't think it's one of the major things that Ronald Reagan is viewed by a lot of people as, in hindsight, as a smart military strategical.
Yeah, there's strategic withdrawal, right?
The decision. So I wrote on Facebook, and we'll get to it later on. I wrote that I contend it was not only the smart thing to do, but within the circumstances, the right thing to do. Despite the bloodshed that had occurred, hundreds of Marines had died.
Yeah, 200.
Including hundreds of Marines. Aside from the fact that it was unconstitutional, as every act in war in my lifetime has been, there is no reason why the same logic would not apply today, especially since pre-presidency Trump agrees and gave his word that he would not repeat the mistakes / crimes of previous presidents.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the media and just how the world works, they've given us a million reasons of why this had to happen. But the original main one was, well, there's an embassy thing, so... Well, you don't just have to retaliate sometimes. You don't just have to retaliate because a bunch of people died. Sometimes peace comes with a different kind of strength.
Yeah. There's another great back and forth, and I don't know who it was, but I'll tell you right now. I think it was somebody quoting Nikki Haley and the strength. I'll find it later, but I'll tell you right now. This was not a strength of Donald Trump. This was a weakness. This may show how weak he is, because when you give in to the powers that be, especially in this MIC thing and the deep state that has absolutely been, used against him. You know what we talked about with the mental and the political jujitsu, where you take the weight of your adversary and you use it against him. Boy, he didn't do it there. He got wrapped up and they used it against him, and now he's over there doing things that he would have. I don't think he would have normally done for a long time.
No, actually, for all the things that I dislike about Trump, so I dislike that he doesn't understand how the free market works. I dislike that he compromises.
It's gonna be a long list, Banks.
I'll try to make it short. I dislike that he compromises, like openly, right? And I'm not just making this assertion. He says, I compromise, and that's the negotiation and so forth. The thing that I dislike the most about Donald Trump is his wanting his, I don't know how to phrase it the best, tough guy persona. Like, that's not what, I don't like that in people in general. I like people who are strength, but tough guy persona, in the same way that I dislike when people are like, oh yeah, if somebody like, whistles at my wife while I'm walking down the street, I'm going to punch him in the face. Like, I don't find that virtuous, because you're not putting principles first. You're letting emotions take the best of you, right? Because you want to be seen as tough, because it is sometimes harder to be like, well, I feel bad for that guy who just whistled at my wife because I'm not sure why he did that. But I'm not going to violate my own principles, which are don't aggress people who haven't aggressed on you. So yeah, that's the thing I like the least about him, and that is probably why that happened.
There's a great quote out there, and it's to emphasize your point. It's a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. That is by that's Jordan Peterson.
Oh,
it is one of my favorite quotes. Man.
I've been listening to him a little bit, so I haven't listened to him like a year maybe, and for some reason he came on YouTube, and I've listened to like 10 hours of his in the past few days.
And that's the thing to me. A principled person who isn't wavering in the wind with politics or swayed by organizations or anything like that, who can look internally into himself, who is extremely dangerous, who has a wrath and a fire that burns inside of him, and in images that I don't think most people can conjure.
And those are some of the most dangerous people are also people who have that same capacity but who don't have principles, because they're able to stay calm, collected, and not let emotions get the best of them.
I'll tell you right now, man, I think about this a lot because there are things that go on in my head that I don't think anybody wants to see or could sleep at night if they did see. There are, the capacity for violence. This office, the executive office, is what what that needs. You need somebody who is ungodly, just one of the most dangerous people on the planet, with a capability for wrath hitherto unseen. And yes, I just said hitherto.
I like it.
But is unaffected by his external world, who has this quote-unquote an OODA loop, the space between your ears that is yours and yours alone, that storm that rages between the external and the internal, and being able to keep that under control and turn the other cheek a lot of times, as we're taught. That is the man that I think the executive should always be.
That is what is put forth in what a father should look like. That is what was put forth in movies all the time, like the calm, collected person. I could name the most popular thing, Game of Thrones, the first guy, spoiler alert, who dies very early on, the King of the North.
Yeah.
That is his persona.
I never saw it, but I get it.
You've never seen Game of Thrones?
No.
You need to see Game of
Thrones.
Man,
I couldn't. I fell asleep during the first episode. Meredith turned it off. She was still watching. I think she got to the rape scene. She's like, no, this ain't for me, man. And then she turned it off, and we just never went back. So
there are a lot of rape scenes.
Yeah, I get it. Medieval nonsense and people. Yeah, still, but you know what I mean. Like that person, you better hope that you never get to that point where that person has to go on defense and releases the dogs of war, because that is not a sight that people will ever forget, and it's something that I don't think most people will survive. That's, I don't know. That's not Donald Trump, man. And I don't think it is most of the people who are, quote unquote, in leadership positions here in America, unfortunately.
So before we get to quotes and social media, we did have an update. So we realized that this is a time sensitive kind of issue.
Yeah, we're at about an hour and a half right now.
Well, not time sensitive in that matter. Like the news is going to continue.
Sure.
I think our whole conversation is timeless in the end. Not because either way it's going to have consequences on American life and world life, but the analysis and principles talked about I think are timeless. But there was something that just happened this morning as we talk on Sunday, so you guys will hear this on Monday. The Iraqi parliament has called for the government to expel U.S. troops. This isn't the first time. Remember when
back in 2008
Obama got kicked? Yep. Well, I thought it was
2008, 2009 I think is when the edict came from the Iraqi parliament at the time.
So did it just take a few years for it to happen? Because it was like 2011.
It's like a retrograde.
When Obama was credited with leaving Iraq, but it was actually just because he was forced out.
Yeah, retrograde takes a bit.
Okay.
And obviously, it never really happened.
So they're doing it again, I guess, because they're like, well, you didn't expel you well enough. And I'm not sure that this is that surprising, especially when I think it was Pompeo the other day who just insulted the leader of the House or the Parliament, whatever it's called, in Iraq, and was like, "You're a terrorist too," or something like that. So again, not surprised, and the consequences are already happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading headlines from Drudge right now. Iran launches cyber attack on the U.S. government website. Red flag raised as mosque warning of severe battle to come. These symbols in the Islamic faith are extremely important. Will punish America wherever they are. Threatens to attack White House. Offers $80 million for Trump's head. Condemns as terrorist in suit. Soleimani body taken to on unprecedented public mourning tour. These happen. I mean, this happens a lot in the Islamic culture. They're chanting "Death to America." Obviously, general steps out of the shadow. Fear hits Tehran over what might come next. Britain must be ready for looming war. Royal Navy deployed. Could America restart draft? Protests across nation. I guess Carr, I don't know if he's a senator or a representative. Trump ordered the strike and came down to dinner cool and collected. New York Times is saying there are doubts at the Pentagon right now. But rage, the top headline in here at Drudge is "Rage Bills Iran's Eyes 35 targets. Trump has 52 rockets launched at U.S. troops."
Yeah, that was a tweet from Trump actually that I thought was interesting. He talks about how Iran is talking very boldly about targeting certain U.S. assets for revenge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He goes back to say that he's responsible for the embassy thing, which we already talked about.
Yeah.
Wasn't as amazing. There are other solutions in escalating war. But he then says, "Let this serve as a warning," in all caps, that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, which I think is an interesting thing because American assets basically means everything, because and I don't just say that, this is not my opinion. We have made the argument through our actions many times that apparently everything is of our purview and affects our assets.
Well, I mean, I think Pompeo was just recently in the past few months when the oil tanker that the British had taken over, right? Like they captured an Iranian, and then we're supposed to care. Like,
well, not only that, I mean, there's
the Saudi Arabia oil fields.
But there's some longstanding, just the principle that apparently if an American lives in freaking, I don't know, South Korea, they still have to pay taxes. Apparently everything on the whole world is of interest and could affect our assets. And so he says, our assets, we targeted 52 Iranian sites representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago. And I thought that first, I was impressed that he actually referenced something so far back.
Yeah. We can't do that.
But the fact that he's referencing something so far back, if I'm citing the people who are defending Trump, it's funny because some people are being like, "Oh, stop talking about history," because like I'm pointing out history, like on the Iranian coup.
Well, we're about to go down the history hole.
It's like, dude, they're citing it too. Okay, let's have some like a fair like playing field here, please.
Yeah. When he tried his Jedi moment, where we did this to avoid war versus go to war comment there in the opening video, history hits me straight in the face. Right, it's the Austrian Archduke Ferdinand moment.
Oh,
right. Mm-hmm. When you look at what may most likely have spawned World War I, everybody points to that moment. Right? It's like, it was just an Archduke. Like, what's really going to happen? This guy's just an Iranian, military head, a military general, basically the DOD's main guy.
Well, there's been arguments that he was like, if somebody had killed like Petraeus or Mathis, and some people have said it's the same as if somebody killed Pence, because he's like the second most important person
in Iran.
In Iran.
But he's pretty important. Any of those quote, God, there's no reverend. Don't get me wrong. There's no damn reverend.
Important within the context. Don't
sure.
worry.
But to sit here and say we did this to avoid war, boy, geez, I just looking at history, I sit there and go, that you just did the opposite of what you think you're, or at least what you're saying.
But that,
in my eyes.
But that's what compromised, tough guy stances can tend to do sometimes.
Well, You're not wrong.
Okay,
I mean,
the guy whistles at the wife. The husband wants to be a tough guy. He goes over and like punches that guy. The guy's friends see that. It can be a whole kerfuffle, real fast.
yeah. Banks, we're sitting at an hour and 30. This is where we usually cut off. We're not going to cut off.
I think a 2-part podcast is a good idea.
We're just going to keep rolling both video and audio for my editing.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in over here, go and take a quick break.
I will entertain the people.
If you want to talk, you can talk. If not, do whatever you want, man. But I'll be right back.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.